Hey, special educators. Welcome to Teach, Taskbox, Inspire, the podcast dedicated to making your job as a special education teacher easier by making your instruction more fun for you and your students. Inside each episode, you'll learn how to get the most use out of your task boxes in the classroom. I'm your host, Lisa Holiday from Chalkboard Superhero, a veteran special education teacher passionate about empowering you with purposeful teaching strategies, helpful tips and tricks, and other classroom management tools that will help you thrive in your role. Let's get started with today's episode. Hey there, special educators, and welcome back to another episode of Teach, Taskbox, Inspire. I'm your host, Lisa Holiday, and today we're diving into a challenge that many special education teachers face on a daily basis, managing classroom transitions for students with special needs. Transitions, whether we're talking about between activities or different locations within the building or even just routines, can be a significant source of anxiety and stress for our students. But with the right strategies in place, we really can help make these transitions smoother and less disruptive, ultimately creating a more positive and structured learning environment, everything that we want, right? So let's explore some practical tips and techniques to help you kind of master these transitions in your classroom. If you are a new teacher or new to special education, you are going to want to record any of these tips because they are going to help you. So let's go ahead and start by acknowledging that transitions are tough. You guys, they're tough. For students with special needs, moving from one task to another or shifting from one environment to another can be so overwhelming. And I don't care if it's a preferred task to a preferred task. Even my son with Down syndrome, who loves these different things, has a hard time stopping and starting and moving from one activity to the next. You know, we could be in Disney World and riding this really awesome favorite ride of his, and we're done with the ride. He's like, yes, that roller coaster was great, and we're going to go to another roller coaster that he loves. But he has a full meltdown. He'll drop to the floor. He doesn't want the people to get him off the roller coaster. He's pulling the bar down. He has a full-on meltdown because he does not want to switch. So guys, yes, we know that shifting from one thing to the next can be very overwhelming. So changes in routine, unexpected disruptions, or even the anticipation of what's next can lead to that anxiety, those meltdowns, those behavioral challenges, or even just a loss of focus. So what can we do to help our students kind of manage these moments more effectively? The first and perhaps the absolutely most important step in managing transition is preparation. Students need to know what's to expect and when to expect it. The best way that you can do this is by using visual schedules. I cannot stress this enough. I've talked about this so often in my podcast. Visual schedules are important. I've linked my favorite visual schedules in the show notes, so be sure to check those out. So number one, visual schedules are really the cornerstone of special education. They provide the students with a clear, predictable sequence of events, kind of helping them understand what's coming next. They want to see their day. They want to know what's happening. Whether it's a full day schedule or just a sequence of activities, these visuals are going to give students the structure they need to feel secure. Be sure to review the schedule with your students at the beginning of the day or kind of before each transition so that they are reminded of what's next. Okay, the next thing, countdown timers. You guys, go to Temu or go to Amazon or go to the dollar store and buy a bunch of timers. Timers give students a visual and auditory cue that a transition is approaching. Now, sometimes I use sand timers, so that's not really auditory, but it works with students who are super visual. You know, whether you're using a 5-minute warning before cleanup time or a 1-minute reminder before lining up for lunch, countdowns kind of help students mentally prepare for the upcoming change. You can use digital timers, apps. You can use a timer on your phone. You can use those sand timers, an egg timer. You can use a huge board timer at the front of your room. Timers help students understand the concept of time because it's so abstract. All right, the next thing is transition cues. So alongside those visual support and those timers, using transition cues can make a huge difference also. This could be like specific phrases or songs or signals that indicate it's time to transition. So something that I've used in the past, especially in my autism classroom this past school year, was, I think it was a doorbell, but it played like The Little Mermaid. The beginning of it was like do 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 do. The kids loved it. It was super short, but it gave enough auditory cue to know every time that went off, every 30 minutes, they knew they had to go to a different center. And it doesn't have to be that. I bought mine on Amazon for like $20, but I used to have a friend who used like, I forget what those are called, but it was like a boom, 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 like she just like used a xylophone. Is it a xylophone? I don't even know. But using that to kind of signal that it's the end of a work session, it's time to go on to the next activity. But the key is consistency. You cannot just use this thing every once in a while. The kids will have no idea what the chime means or what the bell means if you're not using it every single time. You want to use the same cue every time. So it could be a different sound for lunch, or it could be a different sound for music, or it could be a different sound for morning work. It doesn't matter. All right. The next step is addressing the anxiety that often accompanies those transitions. For some students, the uncertainty of what's coming next is really unsettling, and it leads to stress and really challenging behaviors. So here's 3 different things I want you to use that is going to help for that. So number 1, using first, then. This kind of involves clearly stating what the student needs to do right now, which is the first, and what they can look forward to after, which is the then. For example, first we're going to finish our math work, and then we're going to have free choice time. This helps students understand that something they might find challenging or really less preferred is followed by something that they enjoy, making the transition more palatable. The second one is calming corners. So I want you to provide access to a calm corner or some kind of designated place where a student can get their body calm. If a student is feeling overwhelmed by a transition, allowing them a few moments in a quiet, comfortable area can get them to kind of regulate their emotions before moving on to the next task. Now, this might throw the schedule way off, but some students will need this. So I want you to stock your calming corner with things like fidgets or noise-canceling headphones, or maybe even a weighted blanket to help them decompress. And the last thing is positive reinforcement. So praise and rewards for successful transitions can motivate students to handle these moments better. This could be as simple as a verbal praise, like, "Good job, Johnny." Or maybe they get a sticker or a small token that they can collect toward a bigger reward. I have tokens. I will link them in my show notes for you guys to explore. But sometimes saying, "Good job, you got your smiley face, go put it on your board," is just enough positive reinforcement that they're going to need for those transitions. The last thing I want to talk about is streamlining your transition processes. So the smoother your transitions are, the less likely they are to cause disruptions or even stress for your students. So you want to practice. Just like any other classroom routine, transitions need to be practiced too. So at the beginning of the year, spend time teaching and rehearsing those transitions with your students. It might look silly, but it is important for the students to know what those transitions should look like, whether it's moving from the carpet to desks, or lining up for recess, or maybe cleaning up after an activity. Practice these routines until they become second nature. It's something that you can do in the very beginning of the year, or sometimes after a long break, they kind of need the reminder. So the more familiar the process, the smoother these transitions will be. All right, task breakdowns. So kind of for more complex transitions, you might want to consider breaking down the process into smaller, kind of manageable chunks. For example, if you're kind of transitioning from a group activity to independent work that involves like multiple steps, like putting away your materials or getting out a new set of supplies, finding your seat, breaking it down, there might be a lot of steps. So make sure you teach each step explicitly. For this, you want to make sure you use those visual reminders to kind of guide students through that process. Now, I've linked some visual aids in the show notes that might be helpful in this area as well. And the last thing is to minimize downtime. Oh, this is the bane of my existence because downtime equals trouble. It can lead to restlessness and disruptive behavior, especially for students who struggle with waiting. So you want to plan your transitions to be as quick and efficient as possible. You want to have your materials ready. You want to give clear instructions and keep students engaged as you move from one activity to the next. So managing transitions in a special education classroom or even a gen ed classroom is challenging. But with the right strategies in place, you really can help your students kind of navigate these moments with greater ease and confidence. Now, if you're starting a brand new school year, this might look pretty rough in the beginning, but by preparing students, reducing those transition-related anxiety, and kind of streamlining your processes, you kind of create a more structured and supportive environment where all your students can thrive. So thank you so much for tuning into this special episode of Teach, Test, Box, Inspire. I really do hope you found these tips helpful and that you try some of them out in your classroom. That's all I have for you today, guys. Bye-bye. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Teach, Test, Box, Inspire. I hope you've gained some tips and motivation to fuel your week ahead. If you're ready to explore more strategies for empowering your students as independent learners, be sure to dive into my free training at chalkboardsuperhero.com/training. And don't keep all this knowledge to yourself. Share this episode with your special education teacher friends who could use some motivation and inspiration. One more thing before you go. If you're finding this podcast helpful and want to show support, head to Apple Podcasts and leave your rating and review. Until next time, keep teaching, task boxing, and inspiring.